Well, hello everyone, good morning. I think most of you know me by now. My name's Beth. I'm mum to Josh, who's at the back, and wife to Dave, who's usually around. And poor Dave, I heard the title of this preach a couple of weeks ago, and I forced him to swap with me because the title of this preach today is Wonderful Counsellor. And as some of you might know, I am a counsellor, so I was like, I'm doing this one. So Dave very kindly swapped with me. So this Christmas time, we're looking at both the Christmas story, today we heard from Matthew 2, and Isaiah 9 verse 6. So as I've said, the phrase for today is Wonderful Counsellor. And Jesus is our Wonderful Counsellor. Now this phrase might seem a bit confusing. A few months ago, Dave and I were both working from home, and we had a knock on the door, and there were two people there from a national charity. And they came and they spoke to us for a bit about the work they did and about donating. And one of them said to me, what do you do? And I kind of said, oh, I'm a counsellor. And immediately he looked me straight in the eye and said, oh, that's so fantastic. We really need people like you standing up, representing us and fighting our corner. And there was a moment where the person he was with and Dave and I kind of looked at each other and were like, he's got this really wrong. And it was really awkward that we just didn't say anything, so we just carried on. But it reminded me of that moment this week, because there are two types of counsellor that you might have heard of. So there is a political counsellor who is a member of the local council, as this person thought it was. But in recent years, psychotherapists have begun to be known as counsellors, and that's what I do. But this makes me think of Jesus, because he can be both. He can be both our advocate to God and our comforter, helping us through our troubles. And they might seem like they require different skills, but our God is a God of contrast. Matthew 2, as we've just heard, shows that well-known part of the nativity story, the arrival of the wise men. And here we see the star, the wise men on a journey via Herod, and they arrive with joy to worship the newborn king. We don't know how many of them there were, or even specifically where they were from. Some scholars have argued that they were Eastern astrologers from the area that is now known as Iran, even though Dave got that wrong a few weeks ago. But they were clearly people from Iran. But for Matthew, the person who wrote this book, these men represent the non-Jewish or Gentile nations. Jesus had behind the whole world, not just the nation of Israel. And we often miss the imagery of this. Jesus changed so much with his arrival, and we live in the aftermath. The wise men recognized Jesus' authority by bringing the gifts most of us know really well. Gold, which symbolizes royalty. Frankincense, which is often in those dangerous-looking swinging things that have incense in, that you see in sometimes Catholic or high Anglican churches. Mike, we should bring those back. Right? It symbolized the presence of God and was also used in the temple. And myrrh, which was used to anoint the body for burial. These men gave these expensive gifts because they were aware of who Jesus was. They were aware of his value. They see the star and they overflow with joy. They've traveled thousands of miles to be a child who was just a few days old. And tradition says Jesus was about 12 days old. And I think this is very different from our approach today. Often we expect God to come to us. And in some sense he did. He came down to earth as a human. He did come to us. And so our response must be to come to him. Just like the wise men. And further in this, we often expect him to prove himself, to come looking for us and to give us gifts to bless us. And I know I'm really guilty, I'm holding my hands up to show. I am really guilty of using God like a vending machine in my prayer. But we can be truly wise by worshipping Jesus for who he is, coming to himself and coming to him and offering ourselves just as the wise men gifts. Now, kings in this day and age were not just Figureheads, they were also political leaders. And so in this passage, we see Herod. I think his reaction to the news of Jesus' coming shows the political stir that Jesus caused. Herod wasn't actually the rightful heir to the throne of David. And a lot of Jewish people at the time actually saw Herod as a usurper. So it makes sense that with the news of the rightful and true heir being born, Herod would be a little bit disturbed. However, it wasn't just Herod that was disturbed at this news. It said in this passage that everyone in Jerusalem was disturbed with him. Immediately, Jesus' birth caused a reaction. Not everyone in this story was comforted and overjoyed. And across the Christmas story, even in this passage, we do see real joy in Jesus, hope in the world. But for others, we see insecurity and fear for their positions and the world that they knew then. Not much has changed, has it? Jesus is still doing this today, still causing these reactions. His political influence and power has not diminished. So what does this mean for us as his followers? Jesus is our advocate. A counsellor in a political sense represents their constituents. They fight their corner. And Jesus does that for us with the Father, advocating for us because of his sacrifice. Hebrews 7 verse 25 says, therefore he, Jesus, is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede. He is forever saving us from judgment. What a gift, and what a king. Now on to the next part, Jesus as our counsellor. I'm one of those really annoying people who just loves their job. The work I do as a counsellor is an incredible privilege. And the way I and many other counsellors work isn't just about techniques or theories, and this is going to sound really new age, but it's about a way of being. This way of being is showing the client that we don't judge them, that we empathise and that we're here for them. Ultimately, we show we are human too. We're not a distant, cold, clinical expert. And hopefully by showing all of this, I can meet people exactly where they are. I don't expect people to come into the therapy room fixed in any certain emotional state or with all the answers already. And every single encounter is different. And Jesus is the best counselor, the most wonderful counselor, because he does all of this perfectly. I know I should do. He guides us, he advises us, he helps us. But most importantly, he meets us exactly where we are. The thing I was most drawn to in this passage, probably from personal experience, is the idea that these wise men, these men of high rank, would have turned up to the home of a new mum. And I doubt that Jesus, Joseph and Mary were still in the stable at this point. But anyone who's experienced these few weeks after the birth of a child personally or by someone else knows it's absolute utter. Mary had no warning. And I love the idea that these wise men probably turned up and gave Jesus the symbols of his kingship in the midst of the mess and chaos. I mean, you should turn and see my house if you turn up unexpectedly. It's horrendous. Jesus came to us as a human in all of its mess to show we have nothing to fear. We don't have to have it all figured out or be fully prepared to meet him. I mean, if we think back to the story of Mary and Martha, it was Mary who was commended. I always nearly say commended. So it was commended for spending time with Jesus, not Martha, who was concerned about the state of the house. So what does this mean practically? It means we don't have to wait for a set time for prayer or for all of our jobs to be done to meet with Jesus, because I know from personal experience it just won't happen. We don't have to have the right words or know exactly what to say. We don't have to be at rock bottom or be experiencing overwhelming joy. We can pray and meet with Jesus right in the middle of our situations. We can meet with the King of creation, the Lord of lords, right in our everyday lives. He is our wonderful counsellor. And we have come to him.